So what does one do when they realize they're their own guru? Do they seek advice from other gurus? Or do they become the student? How does one become the student? How does one actively write the curricula and the instruction, the lesson plans, while simultaneously being the student? Well, we have the internet and publicly available archives of people just talking and talking some more. So we can run our framework not only against these people, but then also use it to sharpen ourselves, refine ourselves. So I'm going to give you an example. Been developing the Gray Path Discernment Laboratory, for just under 48 hours or so. And we have a case study. Let's hear it. The detailed report written in a narrative form, staying true to observation before interpretation. Let's have a listen, shall we? I'm going to step off to the side, soak it all in.
Not an attempt to become certain. It is an attempt to become trustworthy. Its purpose is to cultivate a way of thinking in which observations are preserved, interpretations are acknowledged, evidence is respected, uncertainty remains visible, and revision is welcomed. Whether the subject is a tarot spread, a conversation, a scientific paper, a YouTube video, a bodily sensation, or a personal memory, the same question remains. What actually happened? Everything else begins there.
Sorry, that was the end of another one. My bad.
The Gray Path Discernment Laboratory's initial application of the Gray Path Discernment Protocol V0.9 centers on Case Study 001, a systematic audit of a public video by Danielle Lynn of True Self Alchemy, visibly titled, "Only Those Who Are Ready to Embody Their True Life Path Will Watch This Fully, the 3-Breath Gateway." Operating with reality contact active, the case transforms an individual critique into a governed methodological stress test. Its purpose is not to determine the creator's character or invalidate subjective spiritual experience. It examines the teaching's authority structure, meaning assignment process, validation mechanisms, operational reliability, and commercial transition. The initial assessment reveals a sharp contrast between the usefulness of the reflective exercise and the reliability of the explanatory system surrounding it. The breath awareness, inward attention, and reflective questions receive a C as reflective practices because they may help some viewers pause, notice internal experience, and reconsider habitual choices. Discernment reliability receives a D+, because the method provides inquiry without a dependable procedure for distinguishing accurate guidance from projection, desire, emotional conviction, or facilitator suggestion. The evidence architecture receives an F because the presentation supplies no explicit falsification, calibration, external verification, or error correction process. Operational robustness receives a D. The physical exercise can be repeated, but its interpretive results cannot be consistently compared or adjudicated. Ethical influence design is flagged for concern because the inward exercise is followed by a commercial invitation without a clearly defined evaluative boundary. The protocol application receives an R as a first pilot demonstration, pending complete verification of the primary source. The central finding is not that breathing, embodiment, or introspection are invalid. The physical sensations and emotional experiences produced during the exercise are real experiences. The epistemic problem begins when those experiences are assigned metaphysical meanings and then treated as evidence for those meanings. For the purpose of audit, the teaching can be analytically reconstructed as establishing 3 broad authority levels: an ego or psyche presented as vulnerable to distortion, a capital S self associated with a central or authentic identity, and a source or higher self presented as specially knowing and resistant to deception. The critical breach occurs because the teaching supplies no operational method for distinguishing this privileged inner authority from fear, desire, imagination, dissociation, emotional reasoning, or internalized facilitator instruction. The architecture therefore permits a self-sealing interpretation loop. Doubt or contradictory evidence may be classified as ego, scarcity, fear, mind tricks, or insufficient embodiment rather than treated as information capable of challenging the framework. This does not prove that every disagreement will be handled that way. It establishes that the method lacks safeguards preventing such reclassification. A second concern involves the movement from exploratory framework to increasingly literal assertion. Early language presents parameters, blueprints, and frameworks as tools through which the viewer may explore. Later language describes body, psyche, higher self, and source connection more directly, culminating in claims that the authentic self can see through deception and recognize what is truly meant for the individual. The interpretive lens therefore appears to shift from optional scaffolding toward an authoritative account of how inner reality functions, without supplying corresponding evidence. A third concern is the assignment of specific meaning to neutral physiological actions. The three breaths are associated respectively with body, psyche, and spirit, or higher self. The exercise may be useful as symbolic scaffolding, but the sequence itself does not demonstrate that each breath contacts a distinct layer of being. The facilitator supplies that interpretation. A related interpretive rule appears when internal uncertainty is discussed. A felt maybe is treated primarily as some form of no. Not now, not in this form, or not until something changes. The Gray Path reconstruction rejects this forced narrowing. A maybe may also indicate insufficient information, competing values, ambivalence, stress, poor question design, or limited predictive capacity. Under reality contact, uncertainty becomes a prompt for clarification and testing, rather than an answer supplied in advance. The commercial sequence also warrants scrutiny. The presentation moves from guided inward attention, through metaphysical framing and emotionally significant questions, into an invitation to join deeper paid work. The transcript does not establish intentional exploitation. It does establish that the commercial invitation follows the reflective exercise without an explicit cooling-off period, grounding transition, independent evidence check, or warning that feeling inwardly called does not itself validate the offer. These structures generate several governed contradictions. The viewer is told to trust personal authority while being given specific rules for interpreting breath, hesitation, and inner guidance. Frameworks are introduced as exploratory but later treated as increasingly literal descriptions of being. The authentic self is portrayed as resistant to deception, yet no deception test is provided. Connection is described as immediate and requiring no achievement, while deeper paid intervention is offered as a route to cultivating or expanding the same process. The Gray Path does not end with dismantling. It reconstructs the usable core, takes several comfortable breaths without forcing the rhythm. Observe sensations, thoughts, and emotions. Record what arises before assigning meaning. Separate sensation, emotion, memory, desire, interpretation, and claim. Ask a focused question. Generate competing possible answers. Identify what evidence would support or weaken each one. Conduct the smallest safe test available. Observe the consequences. Revise the interpretation in contact with what actually occurs. This preserves pause, self-observation, reflection, and self-kindness, while removing claims of infallibility, predetermined metaphysical meaning, and self-sealing certainty. Case study 001 demonstrates the initial diagnostic utility of the Gray Path Discernment Protocol. It does not yet prove that the protocol is objective, universally reliable, or fully validated. Those claims require additional materially different cases, application by another evaluator, documented friction, correction ledger review, and evidence that the protocol can identify and revise its own errors. Accordingly, the Gray Path Discernment Laboratory architecture is frozen at version 0.9 for pilot testing. The freeze applies to its provenance structure, evidence classifications, discernment principles, reality contact assessment, architectural analysis, operational robustness review, contradiction inventory, reconstruction procedure, claim registry, and correction ledger. Its governing invariants are: greater than observation precedes interpretation, greater than evidence precedes confidence, greater than internal experience establishes that an experience occurred, not that its first explanation is true. A method must identify how it could be mistaken. The evaluator remains subject to the same protocol applied to the evaluated system. The case, therefore, stands neither as prosecution nor exoneration. It stands as a governed demonstration of how a useful reflective practice may become epistemically unstable when symbolic interpretation, privileged authority, and commercial influence are not held in contact with falsification, calibration, and revision. The architecture is frozen. The case remains structurally complete pending primary source verification.
That's just the transcript. You know, metadata. And you see how the tool can be turned on the lathe. Not because you set out to do it, but because the environmental demands on the nervous system and your ability, your desire to seek truth and peace outweighed the mind, not by shutting it off or by going into the heart space, by digging through it. Just getting started. I'm not giving my energy to the dark container that was the catalyst for this. I'm giving it to the people that can use it, which is fucking everybody.